kills 300 Americans a week.
Today is day 24 of the partial government shutdown. A constitutional law attorney believes there is going to be a circus on the left when U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is no longer on the scene. AFN's Chad Garning has more.
Politico has reported that the White House is reaching out to political allies and conservative activist groups to prepare for the ailing Ginsburg's possible death or departure from the Supreme Court, an event that would trigger the second bitter confirmation battle of President Donald Trump's tenure. The 85-year-old has been treated for lung cancer and recently missed oral arguments at the court for the first time in 25 years on the bench. The White House is reportedly taking a look at a possible short list of candidates in order not to be caught flat-footed. Matt Barber is co-founder and chief counsel of Christian Civil Rights Watch.
To be clear, I've never been a fan of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She has been directly responsible for the slaughter of millions of children. She has called for the age of consent for children to have sex to be lowered to 12 years old. I pray for her. I pray that she will come to know Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life. But that said, it's time for her to step down.
Barber says Chuck Schumer and the Democrats are going to be apoplectic when Trump appoints a conservative to replace Ginsburg.
We're going to have to put the Democratic Party and the larger left and the fake news media on suicide watch. You are going to see a circus with the left wing like we have never seen in American history as President Trump appoints a solid pro-life conservative to replace the most radical leftist justice in American history, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I'm Chad Groening.
A healthcare facility in Phoenix is bringing in a former county attorney to lead its internal review after a female patient in a vegetative state was sexually assaulted and gave birth to a child at the facility last month. The company says former Maricopa County Attorney Rick Romley will have unfettered access to every facet of Hacienda Healthcare's business as he tries to figure out how it happened. Romley says he wants to hear what the employees have to say.
I hope that they feel comfortable coming forward and talking with me. It's the only way that we're going to be able to ascertain what is going on.
The 29-year-old female victim has been incapacitated since the age of 3. Law enforcement officers are collecting DNA samples from male employees and others who may have had contact with the woman in an effort to find a suspect. School teachers on strike in Los Angeles. Fox's Jessica Rosenthal is talking to them.
The pouring rain didn't stop thousands of LA school teachers from marching outside of their schools. Parents ended up joining in.
This is outrageous. The spending per student is so low.
The district superintendent has said they are willing to commit more money to meet the union's demands and hire 1,200 additional teachers, nurses, counselors, librarians. But the union president, Alex Caputo-Pearl, says no dice.
We're not going to let Austin Butner hoard the reserve and privatize schools. And at the same time, we are going to fight at the state level for more money.
Schools are open during the strike, and some form of instruction is happening at many locations, according to the district.
And Iowa's top elections official has acknowledged that his office mistakenly derailed a long-sought plan to grant residents more expansive gun rights by forgetting to notify the public of the proposed constitutional amendment as required. Secretary of State Paul Pate cited what he calls a bureaucratic oversight for his office's failure to publish notice of the proposed amendment in newspapers before the November election as required by the Iowa Constitution. The mistake means supporters likely will have to restart the lengthy process for amending the state constitution, and that the earliest the measure could be voted on in a statewide referendum would be 2022 instead of 2020. The plan likely would be blocked if Democrats gain control of either legislative chamber before then.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacey on the Right
on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Every Democrat that I've worked with for about 10 years now has agreed to funding for barriers/walls on Obama's watch, on Bush's watch, and all of a sudden it's a bad thing on Trump's watch.
Not one single time, George, has Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer put a counteroffer on the table except $1. Nancy Pelosi said $1. That's not serious. We all know that.
When people start coming back and saying we tried to get across but we couldn't, or even in the news it starts getting out that there's a border wall and other measures in place to keep people from crossing, it'll discourage them from coming.
Governor Northam is trying to get support from lawmakers to make big changes on gun control. Some of the ideas include universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons, and also bringing back to the table Virginia's one handgun a month law.
We had a great conversation. We were talking about Israel and securing Israel and lots of other things, and it was a great conversation. I'm not keeping anything under wraps. I couldn't care less.
And now, Stacey Washington.
President Trump says he couldn't care less, but I got to say, I can. I care a lot, and I'm so glad to be with you today. Happy Monday. You can get a little poor in spirit and discouraged, but I've got the remedy for that. There's a lot going on in our news world, in our culture, in our political realm, and so we're going to talk about all of that today. We're going to be digging into a number of topics. We're going to speak, first off, next segment, we'll have Phil Kerpen, frequent guest of the program. He comes to us from American Commitment, where he's the president. He's going to come on and talk to us about foreign price controls. And we are also going to talk about newly elected Governor DeSantis down in Florida firing Broward Sheriff Scott Israel because of his dereliction of duty surrounding the Parkland shooting massacre. We're going to listen to a little bit of audio from, this is fascinating, this news story about a woman. She's young, she's alone, it's before 6 a.m., and an assailant shows her a firearm and then begins to assault her, and she fights back, wounding him, which ends up with, well, I'm not going to tell the whole story. You'll have to wait to find out what happened, but it's a good girl with a gun story. I love that starting off the new year, not because of the demise of the bad guy, but because it's someone who's innocent defending herself, as is our right, and the Constitution guarantees that. So we'll talk about that as well. We have our daily confession, and we're also going to dig into 8,482 child bride requests. You're probably thinking, where are you getting this from? Like, this has to be fake news. It's not fake news. It's real. 8,000 plus child bride requests the State Department approved for the child bride or the 40 or 50-year-old plus husband to come into the country to be with their spouse, who is, by our legal definitions, a child. Again, third world nonsense. We'll talk about that as well. I don't want any discouragement. I'll say it again. I don't want any discouragement. I understand the nature of the news that we often get into on this program makes it so that people just feel it's like, wow, so that's going on in our country. Well, wickedness has always been present. And there will always be wicked people around and sin present until our Lord returns. So the idea that we're to be bogged down by it, no, we're to be spurred on to action. And that brings us to our daily confession today. And I am so excited about this. I needed it. And that's what made me think that someone in the listening audience might need it. And so let's get into it. Our daily confession today is about fasting and breaking the strongholds. And this is for personal strongholds. It's also for strongholds in the culture. And you might be thinking, well, I mean, strongholds in the culture, we can do a ton. I'll cut you off right there. We can do a ton. In fact, it is our lack of fasting and prayer that makes us unable to impact the culture. And when we see so many things going wrong and so many opportunities for justice to be meted out and for it not to be happening, that tells us we have a problem that we need to address with what God has given us, the tools God has given us. And one of those is fasting. So first, let's go to the scripture. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. That's Matthew 5:6. O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body yearns for you in a dry and weary land without water. Psalm 63:1. And finally, what the wicked dreads will overtake him, but the desire of the righteous shall be granted. One more time on that one. It's good. What the wicked dreads will overtake him, but the desire of the righteous shall be granted. Proverbs 10:24. So this is amazing to me that we have these scriptures that tell us how we can be encouraged, how we can be lifted up. And instead of us accessing them and then using them to run on and get the thing done, we're kind of like, well, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like we can do anything about this problem. Yes, we can. We can do something about it by relying on God. So let's get into I have a couple more for you. Come, all of you who thirst, come to the waters, and you without money come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. That's Isaiah 55:1. And Jeremiah 31:25 says, for I will refresh the weary soul and replenish all who are weak. So what exactly does adding fasting to prayer do? Well, according to Andrew Murray, fasting helps express, deepen, and confirm the resolution that we are ready to sacrifice anything, even ourselves, to attain what we seek for the kingdom of God. Now, fasting is an invitation. We are not required to fast, but it is mentioned often in the Bible, sometimes by Jesus Christ himself, where he talks about, in Matthew, when you fast, your Father who sees you in secret will reward you openly, and that's Matthew 6:17-18. Now, we want to see more of God's kingdom expressed in and through our lives and circumstances. We want to see our spiritual capacity enlarged. We want to encounter more of God's heart, which of course leads to experiencing more of his blessings. And I mean, obviously, we can choose to fast, we can choose not to fast, but it's for those who are hungry for more. And fasting is a paradox. When we fast, our bodies are weak and hungry, but our hearts become tender and more sensitive to the Holy Spirit. And I want to make another point. Sometimes it's fasting social media. Sometimes it's fasting television. And I say that because I felt led on numerous occasions to fast television. It seems like I'm always finding something new to watch or sitting down and watching a show, and I'll fast it. And at first, it's almost as bad as the physical hunger that you experience when you're fasting food, because you're literally, all you can think about is, well, what am I supposed to do now because I'm fasting TV? It shows us how much we've come to give an outsized place to something, whether it's, TV or social media. It just shows us where we are spiritually. And so I'm not telling you that you have to fast TV or social media. I'm just bringing those two up as examples of things that you might feel like, I probably need to give this up for a week or two, or I need to fast this once a week. There's so many different ways to do it. Now, fasting is obviously a paradox because our bodies are weak and hungry, but our hearts are tender and more sensitive to the leading of the Holy Spirit, which is what we want. We can hear from God, and as we become weaker in our flesh because of the lack of food, it makes us more receptive to hearing from him. So it's not about starving ourselves. It's about praying and lifting up our concerns to God while we're in the fast. Now, fasting is also a grace because we can't do it on our own. If you just leave it up to me and tell me I'm not eating anything for 3 days, my flesh is going to rear up and be like, yeah, we're eating. There's no way we're skipping meals. But if I'm doing it through the grace of God, I can fast for long periods of time. And you build it up. So you don't start off fasting 40 days, no food. That's not where you begin, but you can get there. Now, I've never been there for 40 days, but I have been able to fast for long periods of time. Certain foods, like no sugar. I've also been able to do no meat, which I thought that was just not going to, I just didn't think I could do it. But I was able to do it for a very long time. And you might say, well, that's just being a vegetarian. What's so big about that? Well, it's not a big deal for people who love vegetables and only want to eat those. But if you love meat and you want to eat, ribs and chicken and et cetera, it's not going to be cool. Now, there are 7 types of biblical fasting, and I'm just going to run through these really quickly. And what I'm encouraging you to do is, in the face of discouragement, in the face of a lot of news that is bad, in the face of watching, a kind of, it's like a slow/fast cultural degradation that we're experiencing. It's almost like we're seeing it in slow motion. I mean, don't you think, like, sometimes when you're watching the previews for, let's say you're on Amazon. This happens to us sometimes. We'll go on Amazon. We'll see a movie we've never seen. We're sitting down together. We're going to, let's watch a movie together. And we'll pull up the preview, and we're just all, like, we're silent. Like, what did we just, the preview? Because, the preview is supposed to be rated G. They're supposed to keep all that stuff out. Or you turn something on that's in Amazon Prime and you put it on, and 10 minutes in, they're flashing pornography and things like that. it's crazy what we're seeing as acceptable. There's also the proliferation of people who, they're professional liars. They're everywhere, lying all the time, and you see them and you hear them and you know that they're lying, but you also recognize that there are millions of people who are listening to that and accepting it as the truth. These types of things that sometimes, you go into the church house and there's just like hardly anyone's there. And you're thinking, well, what are they doing on Sunday? What are people doing on Sunday besides going into the house of the Lord or meeting people who've never been to church before? This was not the way it was when in my 20s, in my teen years. I didn't know anybody who'd never been to church. I think the first time I met an atheist is when I went to college. And they weren't really an atheist because their parents were Christians, so they'd grown up in church. This is something that we can bring God's kingdom to earth. We're always praying, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We can bring that about by supercharging our prayers with fasting. So here are the 7 types. Fasting to experience a greater measure of the power of God in personal ministry. Fasting for direction. So you're not sure what you should do in a certain situation, you can fast and He will answer. Fasting for the fulfillment of God's promises. Fasting to stop a crisis. This has been done many times in the history of this country. And, we sometimes get away from it. The example here, fasting for national deliverance has been practiced throughout history. They give the example of England's leaders calling national days of prayer and fasting at times of crisis. In 1588, the nation fasted when the Spanish Armada threatened England with invasion. Later, they fasted for God's help as Napoleon prepared to invade. Then again, during World War II, George VI called for a day of prayer and fasting while the Battle of Britain raged, asking God to stop the Nazis from invading. And on each occasion, God spared England from impending disaster. Other leaders of America in the Continental Congress and Abraham Lincoln also called for national days of prayer and fasting during calamitous times. I know that our current president is a newer Christian, if you will. It would be amazing if he would call for a national day of prayer and fasting over our crisis at the southern border, for restoration of families and marriages, and for there to be an overall revival to sweep through this nation. But we don't have to wait for our president to call for that. In fact, we shouldn't be waiting at all. We should be praying and fasting for those things ourselves, corporately, but ourselves. So we can also fast for protection. We can fast for insight into God's end time plan. And lastly, number 7, fasting for intimacy with God, which is called the bridegroom fast. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is this is not about if you have, physical limitations or, health issues where you can't fast. There's no condemnation in not fasting. But if you feel the tug at your heart while you're listening to me share about this, I want you to be encouraged and follow that leading and fast. That's what I'm planning on doing. It's the new year. It's a great time to be fasting and to kind of just reset those desires and the norms that we're following. And I hope that you'll join me in doing that. If you feel so led, obviously pray about it, and follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. But we're in a time, we keep talking about the crisis at the southern border, but we have crises all over in our communities, in our little towns and villages, and also up to the city level, all over. And people are hurting and they want answers. And many of them, since they haven't been exposed to Christianity and to Jesus Christ, they truly don't know what the answer is. And a lot of people are looking to government and thinking, well, Congress isn't doing anything. If they would just do something, a lot of these problems would be fixed. But you and I both know that's not the case. Congress isn't fixing anything. They can't even fix themselves. They can't even figure out how to work amongst themselves without sexually harassing each other and paying each other off out of a slush fund. And I know they're not all doing that. They're not all guilty, but I noticed there's not many of them calling for exposing who's on that list and who's been paid and who's been doing the paying. You notice that? So we don't have to go through these people. They're not our source. We can fast and pray, and God will open up the windows of heaven and pour a blessing out on us that we will be unable to receive. I'm ready. When we get back, we'll have Phil Kerpen of American Commitment right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Keep it here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You can't squeeze more into 3 days than we will in Washington, D.C. on our Spiritual Heritage Tour in June and in September. We're going to the Capitol, the Library of Congress, the Supreme Court, the Lincoln Memorial, the Korean and Vietnam Memorials, the Iwo Jima Memorial, the Arlington National Cemetery, the White House, that's outside, Jefferson Memorial, and the National Archives, and we're going to Mount Vernon on that Saturday of our tour. So much to see, so much to do, and it includes lectures and talks from Stephen McDowell, who will be our historian along the way. For more information on these June or September Spiritual Heritage Tours and the separate tour to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, for all the information on this, go to spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Our oldest son, Brian, is a very gifted preacher, and God is using him in a wonderful way. But early in his ministry, he went through a bit of a challenge. He's given me permission to share this. He was getting many invitations to go and speak in various places, and it was occupying a lot of his time. He called me and said, "Dad, what do you say yes to, and what do you say no to?" I said to him, "Son, there's not an easy answer for that, but I've learned I need to go to the things that God has called me to do. Look at the assignments He's placed before you. Let that be the editing board for your choices and decisions." Now let's rewind about 2,000 years. It was brought to the attention of the church leaders, the apostles, that there was a serious need there in the church. People needed to be served and fed. Listen to Acts chapter 6, verses 2 through 4. "And the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples and said, 'It is not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. Therefore, brothers, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we will appoint to this duty. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word.'" See, they didn't diminish the need. They realized that there were other people whom God would call to meet that need. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Pay close attention to this. If you're feeling pulled by the demands of others, get away and pray and ask, "Lord, what is my calling? What is my assignment? What is it you want me to do?" And then by His grace, operate from that calling. This will give you incredible freedom to say yes to the right things.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org. Join Crawford tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey there. Welcome to the program. Thank you for being with us. I am so happy to have our next guest on the program. We often chat here on the show, and I read a lot of what he puts out through the various mechanisms where he writes and all of that. And it's just always a pleasure to have Phil join us on the program. It's Phil Kerpen. He's the president of American Commitment. Phil, thanks for coming on today.
Okay, my pleasure. I got one of my kids yelling in the background.
I hear that. I didn't know you had smalls. My kids are bigger, so.
My 3-year-old, I don't know, he came in from playing in the yard with some of the older ones, and I don't really know what he's upset about.
But he's got something going on. That's okay. This is the real. It's live radio in the real world, and I'm a mom, and I used to do all of my interviews. There'd always be a kid in the car. Like the first, 2,000 interviews I've ever done, I'd say maybe 80% of them there was a kid somewhere nearby or in the car. But my kids were never 3 when I was doing this, so they would usually be pretty quiet, but they would tap me and tap their watch like, "Are you done?" So I sympathize with you.
Yeah, I've done that before with my older son in the car, where he's got like a video game, and I keep telling him to turn it down. He keeps turning it up. So I've had that experience as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's talk about these price controls. You have this article, and it's "Don't import foreign price controls, break them." First, explain to us, like, what are we concerned about here? What's going on?
Well, we have a situation right now where we're paying much, much higher costs for prescription drugs in the United States than any other country in the world. And, it's one thing
for poor countries to be paying much less. It kind of makes sense. You're not going to try to charge full price to, poor people in poor countries. But it's another thing entirely that very rich countries, Europe, Japan, and so forth, are paying, pennies on the dollar for prescription drugs of what we pay. And most people think that's extraordinarily unfair. And, that's one of the things that President Trump talked about a lot on the campaign trail, the big applause line. He said he was going to stop, us from getting ripped off where, we're paying these massively higher pharmaceutical prices compared to the whole rest of the world. And it really is a very real problem, but it's also a much harder problem to solve than you might think, because if we just slash prices in the U.S., say government comes in and says we're going to pay, international prices, we're going to slash prices on prescription drugs just, sort of by government mandate or government regulation or dictate. The problem is that, it's very expensive to do the research and development to find new drugs. They cost billions and billions of dollars. On average, it costs about $3 billion to bring a new drug to market because of all the failures. And the pharmaceutical industry spends over $150 billion a year on research and development. Now, they don't do that out of the kindness of their hearts, although there are a lot of wonderful, kind-hearted people who work on medical research. They do it because they're able to earn a return on that capital. They're able to earn a return on investment for their investors, their shareholders. And that means they've got to have some place in the world where they can get a market-based return. And if all the other countries have price controls, the only place they can do that is the United States. And that's one reason that our prices are so high, is you can't really get a return on capital anywhere else in the world. But if we follow other countries and have government limit prices, you're going to get a lot less research and development. You're not going to get new cures because there's not going to be a way to earn a return on investment of all the billions of dollars that it takes to get them. And so to bring down prices in the U.S. Without undermining research and development, we really need to raise prices in the rest of the world. We need to break their price control regimes and have them pay more so that they cover, some of the cost of capital and the return on investment. And that's been a major focus of trade policy in this administration, and they've made some progress in the new USMCA. There's some pharmaceutical-related provisions that are very encouraging, and then they're trying to work on that and a lot of these other trade deals that they've got on the table. But at the same time, and I think really sort of undercutting that whole effort, they've now got a proposal for a demonstration project in Medicare that would index prices for Medicare Part B drugs, which are physician-administered drugs, to an index based on international prices, which are government-set price control prices. And I think if we do that, even on a demonstration basis, then, we sit down for a trade negotiation. We say, you've got to loosen your price controls and cover more of the cost of research and development. Other countries are going to sort of laugh in our face and say, well, if the way we do it is so bad, why'd you link your prices to ours and adopt international reference pricing? So I think that this HHS proposal would really undermine what they're trying to accomplish on the trade front, which is the only real solution to this problem of the rest of the world free riding on, the huge investments that we're making in research and development and that we're paying for in these high prices in the U.S. We really need to get the other rich countries to let their prices rise rather than just following them down the path of price controls, because, we'll never know what we would miss out on. If we undermine the incentives to research and development, we won't know what cures, what treatments would have existed if we didn't lose that incentive. And in the other direction, if we actually got the other rich countries to eliminate their government price control regimes, there's a study out now that we would get 10 to 13 new drugs, additional drugs per year as a consequence of that, because of the R&D incentive that would be created. And so, in a decade, that's over 100 new drugs. Who knows what they might be? And so this is a really important trade priority that we really agree with the Trump administration on, but we're very concerned that this latest effort to sort of import foreign price controls into Medicare would totally undercut that, and kind of a shortcut to try to get rid of the price disparity, but one that would have a really negative consequence.
Okay, so I'm on board with what you're discussing, especially the new drugs. And this kind of hits home for our family because we have one of our kids who's recently diagnosed with, it's a lifelong illness that he's going to be dealing with. And one of the things we've noticed is there's a plethora of options that have come out since the last time this family diagnosis was, this medical diagnosis was had in our family. So in the intervening 20 years, we've seen this amazing outgrowth of different treatments that really reduce, you don't have to take 8 pills a day, and you can really live a much more normal life. But it's also very expensive. We're talking like $20,000 per treatment, and you have to have these once every 6 to 8 weeks. And so the drug makers have been able to work together with, insurance and reduce the cost of that. But when they first tell you that over the phone, the sticker shock is like, $20,000 every 6 weeks. You got to be kidding me. Like, we have insurance. Why would we pay that much? Well, we're not going to pay that much.
Crazy.
Well, it is amazing. I mean, honestly, I just sat here. I was sitting right here in this chair thinking, did he just say what I think he said? I said, what did you say? And he said, it's $20,000, but this is what we do. And he explained about a program we could enroll into that would drastically cut the cost of that. So I think we're all on board. I think there's probably just thousands of people in this listening audience who are in a similar predicament where they either are waiting on some new drug to improve the living, just the living, everyday living, or they're experiencing the extraordinary costs that we pay as Americans. But how do you get this done? Because right now we can't even decide that we want to seal off our southern border. Congress is now in the control of the Democrats, and a Republican president who wants to do something common sense like this, you would think everyone would just say, you know what, we hate you still, but this is something good to do. But I don't see Democrats supporting any move like this because it would have to come from Congress, correct?
Well, a lot of the efforts on trade, they're really in the executive branch. The U.S. Trade Representative negotiates all of that. The president negotiates it. Where it comes to Congress is when you actually have a completed deal. And so, that's where we are right now on the USMCA, the NAFTA success with the negotiations done. It is in front of Congress. Democrats are certainly going to play games with it. As I mentioned, it does have some very positive provisions with respect to pharmaceuticals, especially biotech drugs. Canada and Mexico extended their protections for those significantly, which is a big positive in terms of spreading that cost internationally. But yeah, we're going to see if they can actually get that through Congress. And of course, there are all the other issues that are in that trade agreement. That there are a lot of moving pieces. And as sort of the administration moves forward, negotiating with other countries or with Europe as a bloc, however they end up doing it, the administration can take it only so far as getting an agreement. At some point, they have to send it up for a vote, and that's where it gets even more challenging. I mean, not to mention, even negotiating, how difficult it is to negotiate with a country and convince them that they should let prescription drug prices increase in their country. Think about the politics of that on the other side of the table. That's a very tough thing to get done. You got to sort of fit that in with all the other things you're negotiating and try to get them there. But it has been a priority for the administration, and I think that's a very good priority for the whole world, really, because, if we could get all of the rich countries paying more of a market-based price, we would get a lot more medical innovation, a lot more drugs developed. The U.S. wouldn't have to carry the whole cost of that, which would be good for us. But the increase in the development of new cures and treatments would be good for the entire world, including the countries that we're asking to let their prices rise. And so, I think that, that's kind of the key argument. But, yeah, we've got to persuade other countries to do it, which is very hard. And then at some point, you do need to send these trade agreements up for votes in Congress. So there are a lot of choke points that make it difficult, which is why the administration probably might think, some in the administration might think, how about the shortcut of we'll just adopt international prices here instead of trying to, raise their prices abroad as well. And I think that's as we've said, that's a pretty dangerous path to go down. And so I hope that this demonstration proposal will be withdrawn, but we'll have to see. They just closed the comment period on it a couple of weeks ago, so we'll see what their next move is.
So we're talking about a lot of these countries, while they're developed nations, they're still operating off the socialist model. So increasing prices goes against the very heart of what they're doing. They're trying to keep everything cheap because it's, every man gets the same donkey, little bowl of jellyfish, goldfish and cup of Jello. Their idea is everybody gets the same thing. Everybody partakes in the same health care. And I think if we adopt the price controls,
I think it's even less. I think it's less ideological than that. I think it's just, hey, they think, hey, if the U.S. is going to keep bearing the cost of all of this R&D through high prices, then why don't we just have super low prices in Europe and Japan and elsewhere, and we'll just free ride off what the Americans are paying for? I mean, I think their mentality is let's do it because we can. But
what about the idea of them not having access because they're just not paying enough? It's like,
well, that's a tricky one. Not under the current prime minister, but under the previous prime minister in India, there were a series of cancer drugs in particular where they weren't willing to pay a price that the manufacturer would agree to, and the manufacturers were willing to go pretty low, but not where the Indian government wanted them to. And the government just issued what are called compulsory licenses. They basically stole their patents, and they told domestic companies to just steal the patents of major international drug companies and make the drugs themselves. And so governments always have the ability or the threat or the implied threat that they'll just seize the intellectual property, seize the patents of companies that don't sell at the prices they like. And, that threat or implied threat is enough to get most companies to say yes to, very low prices internationally, because they know that, as long as they're making a return on their R&D in the U.S. market, whatever little extra they make abroad is worth it even at low prices. And that's kind of how the markets develop.
Okay, so help me out here, because I can't be the only one who's listening to you say that and wonder. So they have all of our intellectual property? How did they get that?
Really the main example where they just steal it. I mean, it's actually, unfortunately, as a practical matter, especially for traditional drugs, it's much harder for biotech drugs. But for traditional drugs, once somebody has spent the billions of dollars developing it, it's pretty easy to knock it off. It doesn't really cost anything. That's why once patent protection expires and generics come on board, the price collapses to nothing. You get tons of competition, and that's great when the patent life is up. But when you have a country that's just going to say, hey, we're not going to respect the patent if you don't give us the price we want, we'll just basically steal it. There's not really, in most cases, there's not really a technical way to protect that property. There's only the legal way of enforcing the patent, because it's pretty easy to copy the drug once it's been developed. For traditional small molecule drugs, it's a little bit harder for biotech drugs, but even there, the legal protection is the most important thing that protects the property right. It's not, you could reverse engineer anything.
It's funny that you say that, because this is the same kind of behavior we see from China on our technology side with the intellectual property. They just get the phone, reverse engineer it, and sell it in Asia. They're not concerned at all about selling the knockoffs in America or Germany.
There is also a major counterfeiting issue with respect to pharmaceuticals. It's not just the threat that foreign governments might issue sort of a license to steal, as we saw with some of those Indian cancer drugs, but there also are a lot of counterfeit, just straight up counterfeit drugs that are sold internationally. And so I always tell people who say, I like these prices abroad look so cheap, I'm just going to buy, my drugs from Canadian or Mexican pharmacy and get them over the internet or what have you. It's very dangerous, because you might get a counterfeit. You might get something poisonous. A fake iPhone is not going to kill you, but a fake drug might. So that's a dangerous strategy that some people have gone for.
It's almost like going to like some third world, like think banana stand or something, fruit stand, and getting fruit from there and expecting it to be washed and FDA inspected. And it's similar, only with the drugs, it really could be laced with something that could kill you, or just made out of nothing, and you're taking it thinking that
you just don't know. You
just
don't know.
Yeah.
It might just be, there's no telling, But, there are some proposals in Congress to say, well, we can safely do reimportation from abroad. We'll do it with safety inspections. We'll bring the drugs back in as a way to get foreign price control prices into the U.S. That has the same downside as adopting price controls directly, which is you're getting rid of the ability to earn a return on capital on all that R&D in the one market where companies really can. And so you undermine the research incentive with indirect price controls the same way you would with direct price controls. I just think, if we're going to try to bring down prices in the U.S. and have it not affect the incentives to do research and development and find new cures, we've got to be raising prices in the rest of the world at the same time, and we should be. And so, I think that's an important trade priority of the Trump administration, and that's we applaud them for that. And what they're doing, proposing adopting foreign price controls, I think undermines it. So I think they're hurting themselves with this HHS proposal.
Well, I think we got a better grasp on it because you've joined the show today. Phil, thank you so much for coming on and explaining this to us, and for your work over at American Commitment. Thank you, Phil Kerpen.
My pleasure. Have a good one.
Okay, you too. We'll be back with more. Your calls, 866-963-2037, right after this.
Part of growing in Christ is learning how to encourage others. In doing so, you always gain strength for your own journey. It's kind of like you can't pray for someone in earnest and remain angry at them. You may not like what they've done, but the presence of God has a way of sifting the wrath right out of you. You can't encourage someone else in your walk and remain numb to the encouraging words yourself. As you encourage others, you begin to see that all things are possible in Christ Jesus. Your obstacles become visibly obtainable. In this world of self-centeredness and all about me, be extraordinary. Don't be the norm. Each day, stop and take a me poll to determine just where you are in your walk with the Lord. Encourage your brother or sister in the Lord in that area and watch God do some amazing things in your life. Your deliverance is resting in the power of your tongue. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called TuneIn. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
We want America to be a godly nation.
The Awakening with Bishop E.W. Jackson.
It's never been an issue of race. It's always been an issue of the human heart.
A passion to see America rise and shine like a city that's set upon a hill.
The problem in America has always been sin.
Don't miss Bishop E.W. Jackson and The Awakening. Weekday mornings at 9 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Donald Trump's America.
President Trump's strategy of declaring a national emergency has been tried before in a standoff over steel, not a wall. President Harry Truman declared an emergency in 1952 during the Korean War in an effort to take control of the steel industry before a massive worker strike. On the eve of the strike, President Truman addressed Americans.
My fellow Americans, tonight our country faces a grave danger. We are faced by the possibility that at midnight tonight, the steel industry will be shut down. This must not happen.
That sparked the landmark case Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company versus Sawyer, in which the U.S. Supreme Court ruled Truman did not have the power to seize the steel industry. A lot has changed since then. The National Emergencies Act was passed in 1976, but it doesn't define what is or is not a national emergency. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Understand again and remember that the Sheriff's Office is comprised of roughly 5,000 employees and roughly 3,000 deputies, almost exclusively made up of the most decorated and brave and unselfish individuals you will ever meet. I have served with many of these men and women during my law enforcement career, and they are not self-serving. They have the community interest at their heart, as do I. And so, to the employees and deputies now under my command, I understand you have concerns about the transition period. I can only provide the immediate comfort of saying this: I am not here for any type of political, grandiose, or agenda. I'm here to serve. I'm here to provide you with the best leadership that I can provide, as well as with any type of expertise and training agendas and any other equipment elements that's been lacking here. It's coming your way. To the community stakeholders, those who in attendance, those that are watching, you have voted and expressed the rights to select your Broward County Sheriff. So I also understand that there may be some concerns there. And so to you, I say this: I have served you once before, oftentimes in the dark, away from the public light, simply doing my job to enforce the laws of this great state. I'm here to continue that mission under the capacity of sheriff by ensuring you and our deputies have the leadership that they deserve. Thank you very much.
Hey, welcome back to American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here, and we're so glad to have you with us. Do call in and weigh in on any of the topics we've covered so far today. 866-963-2037. We have call lines open. 866-963-2037. So What we've had is this audio that you just heard. It was Gregory Toney. He's the new Broward County Sheriff. He's a former Coral Springs police sergeant, and he's the president of an active shooter response training company. One more time with that last bit. This man, Gregory Toney, who has just been appointed by, the newly elected governor of the state of Florida, Governor DeSantis. Gregory Toney is now the Broward County Sheriff, replacing Sheriff Israel, who has come under fire for not only the actual events of the day, but his comments and really lack of accountability after the Parkland shooting. And it is overdue. He should have been gotten rid of the very same week that the Parkland shooting occurred. The minute the dust settled, Sheriff Israel should have been gone. I don't think they really are done cleaning house. I would hope that Gregory Toney would come in and make appropriate changes where needed. We didn't listen to his entire statement. He did say early on that people think that Broward County is just rife with corruption and that there are no good people there, and he begged to differ with that. He said there are over 5,000 people working for the Broward County Sheriff's Department, and that they by and large are excellent people, and they don't deserve to be tarred and feathered with the same reputation that Sheriff Israel has kind of brought to that environment. And so we're hoping, I'm certainly hoping, and I'm not a resident of Florida, but we're there often, my family and I just think it's horrifying, the loss of life there, where you had officers on the scene who could have stopped the carnage, and they stayed outside. They were cowards. And there's nothing wrong with being a coward. I'll repeat. No shame in being a coward. Just don't go into law enforcement. Don't run around in a position where you need to run towards the gunfire. You need to run towards the burning building or the screams. When you hear distress, your instinct is to run in the other direction and preserve your own life. Be that person. Just don't be that person and put yourself in a position where you're supposed to be another person. It's two distinctly different kinds of people. And we've talked about it here on the show before. It's the sheepdog and the sheep. And there is nothing wrong with being the sheep. You just don't masquerade as a sheepdog so you can get paid and then flake out when it's your opportunity to actually make a difference, which is what we saw with those officers. And Sheriff Israel, really, with his refusal to take responsibility for what happened, it's kind of legendary. Like, I think, historically speaking, 20, 30 years from now, we'll see people kind of saying, oh, you're going to Sheriff Israel that? Come on. So here's some more information about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis's pick. He made an announcement that he's suspending embattled Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel. And he had this news conference. It was outside of BSO headquarters in Fort Lauderdale. He was joined by Andrew Pollack, Max Shader, Ryan Petty, and other parents who've been critical of Israel in the wake of the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. DeSantis actually went so far as to say that the massacre might never have happened had Broward had better leadership in the sheriff's department. And that's something, because, what he's saying is, training-wise, they could have had someone there who would have done a great job. And if that had happened, then there would be fewer loss of life. There might have even been no loss of life, because they would have gotten there, gone straight in, and done a fantastic job of assessing the situation and taking it over. Now, Coral Springs was actually praised for their response to Parkland. Coral Springs, where this new gentleman, the newly appointed Broward Sheriff, Gregory Toney, Coral Springs was actually praised for their response to the Parkland massacre. So they've got their heads screwed on straight. And if he was working there among those guys, he's gotten some training that maybe the Broward County guys haven't gotten. And it's wonderful to cross-pollinate that information. You bring in new leadership, someone with a completely different perspective. That person comes in, and it's not an immediate cleaning house. I'm not expecting him to clean house immediately. He has to assess the lay of the land. But he's going to be able to sniff out the sheep masquerading as sheepdogs. It's my hope and prayer that he'll be able to sniff them out pretty quick. And in doing so, getting this wonderful, it's a sheriff's department. These people are saving lives. They're going out and they're doing things that we regular folk, we don't want to do, because we're not law enforcement. We want those people to have good leadership and to have people in charge who are going to not only train them properly and have the right operational attitude for the entire sheriff's department, but also to have them be really finally attuned to the fact that they need to reset their reputation. Right now they have their reputation's in the toilet. They want to reset that. They want to get the confidence and trust of the public back. And the only way to do that is with someone new to come in and take it over and reset things and get rid of the bad guys if there are any left, which you would assume there may be some still there. So continuing on with this, we still have the same, we have a couple different things I want to get to. There's this story that's out of Missouri, and this is important for us Christians because it goes right to the heart of how we live. We've talked about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and they never stop. Their main thing is erasing religion from public life, but the way they do it is really sneaky and crafty and devilish. They know that they don't have enough money or resources or manpower to fight these fights all over the country. So what they do is they just send a letter. I'm waving paper. Can you hear that? They send a threat on a very official-looking letterhead that says that your town will be bogged down with lawsuits. We're going to sue you guys out of existence if you don't remove that cross. So the cross in question this time, it's usually a symbol of a cross that they hate the most, but any symbol of Christianity in public. And this is in Ozark in Christian County. Is that ironic? The name of the county in Missouri is Christian County. The name of the city is Ozark. They have less than 20,000 people living there, so this is not a fancy town. It's not expensive. They don't have a ton of money on lawyers and all that stuff. The Freedom from Fun people sent this letter to Ozark, and they targeted this giant blue cross that's part of the city's annual Christmas lights in Finley River Park. Now, on the story, I mean, this is a big cross. It's big, it's lit up around the edges, and it's every year they put it up as a part of their Christmas display. So they got little Santas down at the bottom who are lit up. You know, they got what look like candlesticks and other little things, a Christmas tree made out of string lights. You know, it's super cute. Small Town America comes right to you. Freedom from Fun's legal director, Rebecca Markert, wrote that the illuminated cross is not a permissible city holiday decoration, pointing to a federal court case that found a cross unconstitutional as a part of a city display because a cross is not a common Christmas symbol but a Christian one. Now, that's one court case, right? Here's the other thing. How dare she from California or Las Vegas, Nevada, or wherever they're out of, tell this Ozark town what they can and can't have? If everybody in the town is fine with it, what right does she have? I think they would have prevailed in court in Missouri. But she didn't need to go to court, Rebecca Markert, because she knew all I got to do is send this little small town a letter telling them, you guys are going to go down. You're going down. And they'll cave. So the city made an announcement saying they're going to take the cross down because it's a religious symbol on public property and they don't have money to win a lawsuit. After the announcement, the mayor received hundreds of phone calls, which in a town of 20,000 is pretty significant. He says, Mayor Rick Gardner says, everybody wants it up. He actually reported that back to the Springfield News Leader. He said, one lady called in crying, this is a part of Ozark. This is Christian County, for Pete's sake. So the city officials quickly reissued a statement saying that the cross would remain until the issue was resolved to the interest of all parties. So last week, the city announced that they're going to move the cross to the south side of the park on land owned by Christian County A&M Society. Christian County's A&M Society owns land that is in the park. So all they're doing is they're just basically moving the cross across the highway. In striving to balance the court of law with the court of public opinion, we have identified a solution that will relocate the cross from its current location. Freedom from Religion / Fun has already said that this is, you know, what they wanted. They wanted them to remove it from public property to private land. So they're claiming this as a victory. I don't think it's a victory for either side because, first of all, the town should have told FFRF, you know what you can do with your letters. You got something to say, bring it on down here. We'll crowdfund our defense. We're not caving to you. We'll do what we want. It's our town, and you stay in your own town. I feel like that's what they should have done. They didn't. They're still winning because one of the people who lives in Ozark said that the visibility factor from the south side, or I can't say south, they didn't tell me what side of the highway it was, but across from where it was, it actually has more visibility for the public than it did in its previous location. So the residents are counting it a win. I don't know if I would call it a straight up win. Of course, the cross is still up, but they had to expend their valuable time and energy and possibly money to move the cross. It's big. I mean, it's really large. And it also represents this idea that these freedom from religion people can just keep calling and writing and harassing towns and cities across this country and browbeating people into giving in. I praise God that these people down in the Ozark city, this little city, that they were so firm in their resolve not to have it taken down. And they are, if you ask me, they're reasonable people. They're actually super nice, if you ask me, because I just don't see any situation where if I was the mayor that I wouldn't have dug my heels in and said, so you want to do this? We're going to set up a crowdfunding and we're just going to fight you until the cows come home, because this is our town and you're not telling us what to do. In any case, I'm glad the cross is still up. We have a number of them in Missouri. If you're ever driving down Route 66 or you're taking Highway 70 and you pass through St. Louis, on both sides, you'll find huge crosses that you can see from the highway. And some of them are just lit with uplights. And we have a whole series of billboards on most of the major highways going out into the county that talk about Jesus being the only answer. Crisis pregnancy resource centers have their information up there. Abortion is sin. Abortion is murder. If you've never known Jesus, dial this number. I mean, we've got it all going on here, and this is the heartland. But I just thought it was interesting that that's what we had going on. And I tell you what, I'm concerned mainly because I'm just as against these freedom from fun people as anybody else who's a Christian and doesn't want to see their influence increase. I'm just concerned that they take every little, if they can get an inch, they consider it a victory, and then they adjust all their little letters. And that's all they do. They just sit in their office and write letters and try to bully people into doing what they want from where they are. They're never going to go to this town. They're never going to go there. The cross does not bother them in the least. It's just the idea that people are out having fun with religion and enjoying themselves that drives them crazy, and they have to put a stop to it. Not cool. I just don't think we should be giving in to them. So I wanted to also give a little word of just a caveat. We're seeing some over at CNN, they're saying polls show the president's approval rating is in the tank, and that he's the only one who's getting he's the only one who's getting blamed for the shutdown. Other polls show, lesser known polls show that as the shutdown stretches on, yeah, the president's getting blamed for it because he said he'd take responsibility, but Congress is also getting blamed too. They're down in Puerto Rico. All of the Democratic congressional members are down in Puerto Rico on the beach wearing scandalous little bathing suits and partying and working with the Puerto Rican government. They say they're doing, helping with hurricane relief from last year when they were devastated. But they're not in Washington, D.C. The president is. He hasn't left. He missed his traditional Christmas down in Florida. And you guys know how I feel about Christmas. That was not cool that he had to stay in Washington, D.C. and not go do Christmas with Melania in the normal way that they've grown accustomed to. That's not okay. But he did that because he's working for free. I don't know if should I remind everybody that the president doesn't take a salary? He's not taking $1. Well, I'm sorry. He takes $1 in salary because he's required to take $1. Everything else gets donated back to the government. So, yeah, these Democrats, it ain't cool what they're doing. They're in the wrong again. All right, there's the music. God bless you from the heartland. American Family Radio, Urban Family Talk. You're at home, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Urban Family Talk.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, Empowered Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump continues to make his case for a wall on the U.S. southern border, telling farmers at a convention today in Louisiana that it will help cut down on crime and save the U.S. money in the long run. Still, the president says Democrats would rather play politics.
They think if they can stop me from building the wall, that's good. This is the reason why they don't want the wall built, because they all know it works. They all approved it numerous times. I mean, Chuck Schumer had his hand up every time this would come up. The senators know this. They're only doing this because of the 2020 election. Because I said I'll build the wall, and I'm going to build the wall, and it's only one of many things that I promised.
The truth is sometimes hard to bear, and that is especially the case when it comes to drugs and violent crimes as a result of illegal immigration. But speaking about this on Janet Mefford Live, Daniel Horowitz of Conservative Review said at least people are talking about it now.
So I think this is a good thing that we're finally having a sustained national dialogue, which is why I applaud Trump for not focusing so much on the wall during that speech, but more generally the problem.
The Senate Judiciary Committee meets tomorrow to begin the confirmation process for Attorney General nominee William Barr. Here's Fox's Gernal Scott.
Barr led the Justice Department under the late George H.W. Bush. New GOP Senator and Judiciary Committee member Marsha Blackburn said on Fox's Sunday Morning Futures that experience will be important.
To have leadership that is seasoned, and he would be a steady hand.
But Democratic Senator Dick Durbin said on ABC's This Week that he will need some guarantees from Barr as it concerns the Mueller probe.
Ironclad, rock-bottom assurances in terms of his independence and his willingness to step back and let Mueller finish his job.
Gernal Scott, Fox News.
A Wisconsin man is officially charged in the abduction of 13-year-old Jamie Kloss and the killing of her parents. Fox's Jeff Manasso reports.
Court documents show that Jake Patterson used a shotgun to blast his way past the Kloss family front door October 15th, shooting both James and Denise Kloss in the head before hog-tying 13-year-old Jamie Kloss, dragging her to his car and throwing her in his trunk, holding her captive for nearly 3 months before her escape in Gordon Thursday. The papers also show that Patterson has confessed to the crimes, telling investigators that he tried several times to kidnap Jamie, though was scared off by lights, people, and cars in the driveway. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
A high school Bible club in Pennsylvania is speaking out to say its free speech rights are being violated. Bob Kellogg explains.
Mechanicsburg area senior high school Christians report the school principal has banned them from handing out Bibles in the lunchroom. They say the ban is unconstitutional. Matt Staver of the Liberty Council agrees.
That right to free speech for students includes before or after class, in between class, and during the lunch hour. They have a right to be able to distribute literature, which includes the Bibles, to individuals who are willing to receive that literature.
According to Fox, this is the third time Principal Davis Harris has clashed with the club over this issue. Staber believes this appears to be a case of anti-Christian bias.
Certainly it has a history of showing animus or hatred or bias toward this particular group because it is Christian.
Because of a pattern of hostility shown by the principal, Staver believes it may be time for the principal and the school to learn a lesson the hard way by taking them to court. I'm Bob Kellogg.
And no economic reports today, but the rest of the week will provide plenty for investors and analysts to talk about. Dan Celia of Financial Issues will be paying close attention tomorrow to the Producer Price Index.
Looking like it's going to be negative, or at least that's what they're estimating. Retail sales numbers coming out for the month of December, one would think, well, wait a minute, December, right? This is going to be really good? Well, it's expected to be up about 0.1%. That's far from really good, if that is the number we get.
Some housing numbers are also due out this week. Find more news at wennewsnow.com. Thanks for listening.
Before I came to Teen Challenge, I felt that I was in a dark pit. Adult to Teen Challenge can or at teamchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Every Democrat that I've worked with for about 10 years now has agreed to funding for barriers/walls on Obama's watch, on Bush's watch, and all of a sudden it's a bad thing on Trump's watch.
Not one single time, George, has Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer put a counteroffer on the table except $1. Nancy Pelosi said $1. That's not serious. We all know that.
When people start coming back and saying we tried to get across but we couldn't, or even in the news it starts getting out that there's a border wall and other measures in place to keep people from crossing, it'll discourage them from coming.
Governor Northam is trying to get support from lawmakers to make big changes on gun control. Some of the ideas include universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons, and also bringing back to the table Virginia's one handgun a month law.
We had a great conversation. We were talking about Israel and securing Israel and lots of other things, and it was a great conversation. I'm not keeping anything under wraps. I couldn't care less.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Well, you know what? I can't even begin to express how crazy it is that we're still seeing the government shutdown go on and that the Democrats are reveling in that. But hey, it's Monday. We're here. We're grateful to be here. And we got to give glory to God for just the fact that we're all still making it, doing what we do. And that includes being here on American Family Radio, Urban Family Talk. Thanks for joining the program. Go to urbanfamilytalk.com, also afr.net. I know we are in the planning stages of the second annual marriage conference, which was the inaugural one was last year in the fall. Different dates this year. So I just want to give you a heads up and ask you to keep your eyes and ears peeled. We hope to see even more people there, meet more of our just trusty, fantastic, amazing listeners, and to get the opportunity to spend time with you and to just fellowship and share like we did last year, but at an even greater level. So we're so excited about doing the conference again. I can't wait for our planning meeting that's coming up. We're going to be talking about that, and it's going to be super, super informative. We're excited about doing it, and we're excited about seeing you again. So first off, good girl with a gun. I love these stories, not because someone is, obviously the end result is that one person ended up being injured, but I love it because the woman who was alone at a bus stop in a kind of shady area of town at 5:50 in the morning, apparently, waiting for a bus to go to work. She's standing out there by herself with a big, she's got her puffer jacket on, her hood's up. She's just waiting. She wants to get on this bus and get to work. And then someone steps in to try to change her circumstances, and she was having none of it. It's number 4.
Surveillance video shows the victim standing at the bus stop, apparently on her way to work just before 6 this morning. The camera mounted across the street outside a drugstore. Moments later, a 19-year-old man can be seen in the picture. Police say he showed the victim a gun and tried to rob the 25-year-old woman. There is a struggle, and she is knocked to the ground. But she turns the tables and shoots the man once in the neck.
All I heard was pop.
Really?
I'm like, but this is normal for around here.
Cedric Dumas says by the time he came outside, police were already on the scene and had crime scene tape around the bus stop. Neighbors say this can be a dangerous area, and many women carry weapons to protect themselves. The victim in this case, according to police, has a concealed carry permit.
He got what he deserved. He ran up on the wrong person. So she did what she had to do.
In the surveillance video, the man can be seen running away around the corner while the woman runs across the street. Police took the man into custody down the street. This afternoon, detectives were searching that area. The man, meantime, was transported to a hospital where he later died.
He forgot that people around here carry guns, and you will get popped. He got popped.
Well, police question the 25-year-old woman with the concealed carry permit. They have filed no charges, though they say the investigation is continuing. Meantime, the medical examiner's office has not released the name of the 19-year-old man who was killed.
So this is, the video doesn't actually show, the video on their website doesn't actually show the whole thing going down. What it does give you, it gives you the surveillance video from the business across the street. I think it was a pharmacy. It gives you the view of her standing there and the guy running away. It doesn't show her actually, defending herself. But she was injured slightly in the scuffle, and, she was definitely, if it hadn't been for her being armed, the story would be reading quite differently today. So I stress, as always, to consider personal self-defense, your personal safety. Consider getting trained, consider taking some courses. We took a date safe course, the girls and I. Obviously, I'm married, but the girls spend time, they go to youth group, and our older daughter is in college, and so there are situations where guys are going to be around, and the date safe course, which is given through Thrive here in St. Louis, it is a fantastic course. It's phenomenal. And I knew it was going to be good, but I was surprised by the depth of information that was given out that night. It was a very fun environment, and it was just shy of 2 hours long. And they had a couple of the moms that I actually know from other things were the ones who set it up at their church youth group house. They have a little single-family residence adjacent to their church where they hosted it. And so we went. I didn't know what to expect except that it would be some training. I've seen the trainer on our local TV stations and networks talking about giving this class. And so when we got there, I expected it to be good, but I was kind of blown away by the level of information that was given and how good it was. And so it's not that, obviously, I'm not looking for any of these things to happen. I don't want anything like that to happen, but being prepared is actually saying this could happen, so I'm going to do something about it. So I think it was fantastic that we were able to take that training. And they have other classes like that in cities across the country. So you can always get a little bit of training for just using mace or pepper spray, keeping that individual one with you in your purse, et cetera, et cetera. So, and of course, praying before you leave the house. I can't tell you how important I think that is. I think it is so important that, when you're just headed out, just pray about it and then go on about your business. But obviously there's something else that goes along with this. She was in a bad area of town. They'd had a lot of assaults and robberies and muggings in that area, which is why one of the eyewitnesses that you heard in the piece said, everybody around here carries guns because they're tired of getting robbed, and if you do something, you're going to get popped. He was kind of stating, the obvious, which he felt like this guy should have known. So, good story. So I did lead off with this at the beginning of hour one of the program about the State Department approving 8,482 child bride requests. So you might just be sitting there thinking, what in the world? So first of all, I'll give you a little statistic that you may not, I just don't think you're believing this. Like, you're listening to this, I was reading it, and I just was sitting there like, I just don't believe this. 167,000 children under the age of 18, some as young as 12 years old, are legally married in 38 states in America. 167,000 children under the age of 18 are lawfully married in 38 states, some of them being as young as 12. So that sets the stage here. Between 2007 and 2017, the U.S. State Department approved 8,482 child bride requests, which it's an adult who's living in the country lawfully, who wants to bring into the country lawfully a minor spouse or fiance, or it is a minor living in the country lawfully, petitioning the U.S. State Department to bring an adult spouse into, or fiance, into the country from abroad. This is reporting that's been gathered, researched, and brought to us by the Associated Press. Additionally, U.S. government approved 204 requests by minors to bring in their minor spouses and fiancés. So this is minors bringing in other minors. In nearly all the cases, the girls were the younger person in the relationship. In 149 instances, the adult was older than 40, and in 28 cases, the adult was over 50. So remember, we're talking about a girl under the age of 18, bringing in a spouse, and 28 times it was a man over the age of 50. And in 149 cases, it was a man older than 40, married to a woman younger than 18. And our State Department said, yeah, come on in. Bring that into our country. Let's normalize that. Let's bring it in. No problem. Some of the examples cited included in 2011, immigration officials approving a 14-year-old's petition for a 48-year-old spouse from Jamaica to come in. Another time, a 71-year-old man was approved in 2013 for his 17-year-old wife from Guatemala to come in. He's 71. I hope you're not eating while it is after lunch. God bless you. But guess where the majority of these requests came from? Mexico, followed by Pakistan, Jordan, the Dominican Republic, and Yemen. Middle Eastern nationals had the highest percentage of overall approved petitions. The information was initially gathered by the Senate Homeland Security Committee after a request was made by the State Department. Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin, said this indicates a problem. In his letter, he and his former colleague, Senator Claire McCaskill, said our immigration system may unintentionally shield the abuse of women and children. As the report indicates, these child bride requests apparently are legal because most states allow 16 and 17-year-olds to marry with parental permission. Now remember, these are laws that were enacted back when a 17-year-old person was working a full-time job and you were either finished with school. There were plenty of situations initially where a 16 or 17-year-old was a full-blown adult. Nowadays, where 18 is the age of majority and we keep kids at home and on our insurance until they're 26, this seems kind of ludicrous. Now, I can see where a parent who has a child who's outside the house and is acting like an adult at 17 and wants to get married to another person in their age range, and the parent feels like, well, I already have lost control of this child. They're not living here. I might as well give permission so that they don't have to be out of wedlock with all of this stuff and doing that. But that's totally different from situations where you have a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old petitioning to have a 48-year-old or 50-year-old man come from another foreign country and be an American citizen so they can marry them, or they're already married to them. That should not be lawful here. You should not be able to say, I'm 14 and I'm married and I want to bring my husband over. They should say you have to wait until you're 18. You'll be all right. Just wait till you're 18. So children under age 16 can marry in the following states: New York, Virginia, and Maryland, provided they get court permission. Now, there's a lot of people who are really disgusted by this, including myself, but people who are fighting against this. And so Frady Rice fights against coerced marriage through the group Unchained at Last, and she told the AP that data from New Jersey show that nearly 4,000 minors, 4,000 of them, mostly girls, were married in the state from 95 to 2012, including 178 of these girls who were under the age of 15. The report also noted the case of Naila Amin, who is 29 now, but was 13 and living in Pakistan when she was forcibly married to her first cousin, Tariq, who was 26. Amin was betrothed to Tariq when she was 8 years old and he was 21. My passport ruined my life. She has dual U.S. and Pakistani citizenship. She said, people die to come to America. I was a passport to him. They all wanted him here, and that was the way to do it. I was a child. Why weren't any flags raised? Whoever was processing this application, they don't look at it. They don't think. And I'm sure there are so many other women who, after living this horrifying arrangement, have then gone on to either have their freedom or possibly just they're still there, and they're wondering the same thing. Why would our State Department normalize this kind of behavior? I mean, who cares what individual states like Maryland and New Jersey are doing? How about just the good common sense that a 12-year-old girl cannot give consent, nor can a 14-year-old girl? This is not a place where you have a child who has a fully developed decision-making center where they can decide if something is good for them or bad for them. It's such a disgusting bit of news. And, you know, with everything else that the president has going on to try to fix, we just have to add this to our prayer journal, that we would have good, clear-thinking people working in the State Department who would stop making these approvals and stop allowing this to proliferate within our country. I mean, come on. All right. When we get back, we're going to be talking about this whole idea that President Trump is a Russian agent. Here's a hint, he's not. Stay right there.
The Ministry of Preborn meets abortion-minded women right where they are. When a young mom sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to keep her baby.
And I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
This mom chose life for her baby.
She's been such a joy. Her name even means rebirth and sort of being raised up from the ashes. I now see my daughter, and I cannot imagine my life without my happy, lovely, joyful, smart baby, and I'm so grateful.
Preborn runs and leads Christian pregnancy centers all over the country. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Pastor Rick Stedman asks, is it reasonable to believe that God exists? He says that it is because of zombies, superheroes, music, sports, and science. That is the premise in his book, 31 Surprising Reasons to Believe in God. He begins his book by telling a true story of a family on rural property in Northern California. They found a rusted can by a tree. They ended up finding 8 cans containing 1,400 gold coins worth an estimated $11 million. Asked if they had any clue of the treasure, they realized in hindsight, seeing a tin can tied to the tree where the wood had grown around the can. There was a clue to the treasure, but they just didn't see it. Rick Stedman says that we have many more clues of God's existence, and we often do not see those. For example, our culture has this fascination with superheroes and fantasy movies. You would think that in a society that has become so secular, popular interest in supernatural heroes would have diminished. In fact, our current interest illustrates the spiritual longing within all of us. In his section on yearning for a better world, he talks about how even non-believers believe human trafficking is a vile evil that must be stopped. This provides common ground for discussion, and it challenges the secular idea that all morals are temporary and inventions of culture. Our universal rejection of such evil argues for a transcendent standard. In another section, he talks about the glory of the universe, mathematics, and the scientific method. Each of these, in different ways, argues for something more than the natural world and point to the existence of God. This is a book that will encourage your faith, but it is also a book you can give to your non-Christian friends who have never thought about the clues around them that point to God. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'm not going to comment on New York Times stories, but I'll certainly say this, that the notion that President Trump is a threat to American national security is absolutely ludicrous. Margaret, I've answered this question repeatedly, indeed, on your show. The idea that's contained in the New York Times story that President Trump was a threat to American national security is silly on its face and not worthy of a response.
Whoa. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here today on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. You're listening to Mike Pompeo saying that it's a silly, ridiculous, ludicrous idea that the president was a Russian agent, and it's not even worthy of a response. And I think he's totally dead on here. The reason why we're seeing this resurrected is because someone decided that Democrats are losing the war on the president when it comes to calling him a Russian colluder. And in not mentioning it and letting it kind of pass by and go by the wayside, they're missing an opportunity to demonize him even further because they don't like the shutdown. They're blaming him for that, but they also don't want people to forget that he's some kind of foreign person. He's not one of us. He's working against our country. Now, we all know that's just garbage, and it's why we have to continue to pray for the president, for his strength, for his fortitude, and for his protection. But it is interesting that this new narrative has kind of reared its head as the shutdown stretches on, and they're losing the kind of messaging battle on that, because most Americans are saying, oh, it snowed 10 inches in Missouri and blah, blah, blah. And wait, what'd you say? Our wall's immoral. I had a fence around my property. My house is comprised of walls and floors and ceilings. What are we saying? What exactly are we saying? So That's not working. So they want to kind of deflect over to this Russia thing. They want to deflect back to it. Now, Jake Tapper is on the bandwagon. He apparently got the email with the talking points, and he's going to, you know, push it home to the just let's get it done. Jake Tapper says to Senator Johnson that you need to condemn President Trump on Russia. And Senator Johnson was having none of it. It's number 5.
Well, again, I don't want to go speculate beyond the fact that I know he was burned by leaks in other areas and he was pretty frustrated by it. So that might be one explanation, but otherwise I really can't comment further. I mean, in the end, I'm going to judge this president based on his actions. As you said earlier, we have increased sanctions. We have begun providing lethal defensive weaponry as well as training to Ukrainians so they can defend their territorial integrity. The jury will be out on other actions this president will or will not take. So in the end, you just have to, you know, basically judge him on his actions. We defeated basically ISIS. We've taken away that caliphate. You know, we were all concerned about a precipitous pullout. Now that's going to be conditions-based. We can certainly attack ISIS and continue to attack them from positions in Iraq. So again, I will wait to see. But I've seen pretty strong actions on the part of this administration against Russia. They realize Russia is a threat. And I think we have been, by and large, responding to that threat with strength and resolve, which is what we need to do.
And that's all we can do, right? Remember President Obama and his comments to Russia. CNN had on their homepage this morning, I just flipped over on my phone, just to check it out. What are they saying? They have a picture of President Trump standing next to President Putin and, you know, a little headline about him working for the Russians. But we've seen President Obama very chummy with President Putin. And other previous presidents have been chummy with not just him, but previous presidents in Russia. It is not abnormal for us to have relations with the nation state of Russia. It's also absolutely something that we saw President Obama wasn't concerned with, which is stopping their cyber attacks, keeping up to snuff with what they're doing online and stopping them from their incursions. The other thing that's been really interesting to see is how much attention has been paid or not paid to the fact that Jim Comey lied about whether or not there was a counterintelligence investigation ongoing about the president. He knew there was. He kept that information from Congress, and he only reported on it when they called him on the carpet to bring him to testify before them. I mean, these are like the minutia that you kind of forget. You're probably happy to forget it. I know I certainly was until I read about it this morning. We're kind of happy to forget about James Comey and his mealy-mouthed, like worm tongue way of testifying about things. He acts so superior. He sits there and he's hunched over to one side with his legs crossed. And the way he talks to the congressmen and the senators who want to question him when he goes in to testify, it's like, well, yeah, same answer. I mean, he just tosses his kind of, he's got a really condescending, negative, almost putrid disdain for people who are elected, as opposed to him, where he got hired into a job and rose up through the ranks and he's accountable to no one. And you can tell that's what he thinks. He's just like, I'm not accountable to you. I'm James Comey. You know what I'm saying? I do what I want. I'm James Comey. Really, bro? So there's this other story out there, which I thought was pretty interesting. The New York Times, hardly a conservative paper, is reporting that the FBI retaliated against Trump for firing James Comey. I mean, it's just like every time you think the story can't get any more swampy, it can't get any murkier, it can't get any more like dirty, then they come out with something else. They're like, oh, by the way, don't forget. This Friday expose from the New York Times reveals that the FBI investigation of Trump for alleged treason was little more than a retaliation against the president for lawfully firing an incompetent and ethically challenged FBI director, which I told y'all, I remember talking about this on the air. It was actually, it was a while ago. I remember talking about how as commander-in-chief and any CEO, any executive, the higher up the person is that they're interacting with, the more likely it is that if that person displays any sign of disloyalty, that person would the CEO, the hiring manager, whoever it is, would want to get rid of that person. And the reason is because the higher up the executive is that's reporting to the CEO, CFO, CIO, whatever, or the commander-in-chief, the higher up that person is, the more power they have to influence and directly harm the work effort of the the person that they're ultimately working for, which is the head of the company. That's why CEOs choose so carefully when they're looking at people to head up huge divisions or departments in their companies. President Trump didn't have the opportunity to choose his own FBI director because James Comey was already there. But it stands to reason that a man who's run a multinational corporation that is highly successful for 60-some years, he's been working since he was a teenage boy, would be able to recognize almost instantly that James Comey was uncomfortable around him and did not feel loyal to him. And that at that moment, his instinct would be to fire him immediately. But because this is government, he had to do it the roundabout way. Excuse me. Perennial dry throat because it's been snowing. I know that doesn't make sense, but I think anyone who's ever hired someone or anyone who's ever worked at a company where high-level people interacted and you were nearby, you would be able to tell. My analysis holds weight. There was an opportunity for James Comey to say, I don't like President Trump, but I like being the FBI director. And I know there's been some untoward goings on, but I'm going to straighten up and fly right because I want to stay here. I want to keep leading the FBI. I think there's still more work that I can do, more good work that I can accomplish. And if he had done that, I sincerely believe that he would still be there, not because President Trump liked him, but because it was better to keep him, cheaper to keep him than it was to let him go. Now, I don't mean forever. I just mean at least through the first 2 years of President Trump's tenure. But James Comey wasn't there to try to do something for the American people or to do something for the FBI. He was there as an operative on behalf of the Democrats and Hillary Clinton. He did not just lack loyalty to President Trump. He lacked loyalty to the entire administration and to the FBI itself because his actions brought shame and horrible consequences in the public eye for all FBI agents. This is like when you talk about someone making a choice at work that negatively impacts the organization. Normally, a company would say, they call you in and there's somebody out from HR at your desk, cubicle, office, and they're packing your stuff up. They got boxes from, paper boxes that are empty. They're packing your stuff up. You're in the HR office thinking, I wonder what's going on. Or I know what's going on. I hope they're not planning on firing me. Or I got some dirt. I'm gonna make sure I go out of here with a bang. And you're in there and they're out there packing out your desk. And so in a situation like this, it would normally be, we're going to give you 3 months severance or we're going to issue you your balloon payment and you're out of here. You're done because you're embarrassing the company. And there would be no negotiation. It's just, you're out of here. The question is, are 2 security guards going to haul you out of here under your armpits, or are you going to walk out of here under your own steam? Just grab your boxes on the way out because we've already packed out your stuff. Put your key card on the table, your keys, put your company laptop, company phone, put it all on the table, and let's sign these papers so we can get you out of here. These are the things that go on every day around the country in major corporations, tiny companies, you name it. It happens. I have heard enough stories from people that I know who work at places like this, these corporate environments, to know that sometimes when the axe falls, the person is literally like, they will call in sick because they're actually sick and miss their own firing and come in the next day or a week later whenever they've recuperated to find some other person, a temp at their area or some coworker of theirs managing all of the projects that they were in charge of, and they will get told in the HR office the day they return because they need that key card, they need the secured items back. This happens. And if the U.S. government was a normal corporation, what would have happened is the first time that the president took James Comey to lunch and James Comey was uncomfortable and shifting in his seat and couldn't look him in the eye and had a really worm-tongued demeanor, President Trump would have had lunch with him, and then he would have sat down with the people in HR and said, what does it look like letting this one go? He's got to be out of here. And who do we have that can take over his duties until we find a replacement? This one has to go. It would have happened immediately, but we're talking about the federal government. So you have President Trump going out to lunch with James Comey and inviting him to meetings over and over and over again, trying to win him over and feel him out to are you really against me? Are you really working against me? I'm the president of the United States. He's trying to take James Comey's temperature, and James Comey is shifting, like a kid who's got ants in their pants. He cannot sit in Donald Trump's presence. Why? because he's his enemy and he's been working against him from the moment he declared he was going to run for the presidency. And any person with any people skills at all can tell when they're sitting in the presence of someone who hates them, or someone who has their ill intent towards them, or has not their best interests at heart, or at bare minimum, someone who is not loyal. Sure, there are people out there who can fake it, and they're sociopaths, by the way. They're psychologically malignant, but there are people who can fake it. But for most people, if they don't like you, it's coming out. It's seeping out of the pores. And James Comey is one of those people. And he displayed that to President Trump. And President Trump had his hands tied. He has to put up with this guy all these times. Every time they meet, James Comey is typing out little memos in his sedan, his FBI sedan outside the White House, typing out memos and saving them after having what essentially is a classified meeting, because he's meeting with the President of the United States for work chat. And all of this is going on. I mean, Democrats would have us to believe that Donald Trump was completely oblivious to the fact that he had an FBI director who was not just loathful towards him, but possibly was working against him and his administration. And then it's supposed to be this big deal that he fired him. I'm actually, after watching Donald Trump on his TV show all those years, me and my husband used to watch after the kids went to bed, it's actually a shock to me that he waited that long. I don't understand why the president didn't just let him go in the first 30 days. As soon as he was inaugurated, he didn't just meet with James Comey and like, oh, wow, this guy is not for me, and then just let him go. But oh no, James Comey's a Republican. I mean, there was all this, it was meant to paper over his true intentions, all of that media attention about how honorable James Comey was, and how he's a career public servant, how he's a Republican. Dude was not a Republican. Not if Republican means what I think it means. So in addition to all of that, what I just recapped there, you've got this New York Times article that says that the FBI's surprisingly flimsy justification for launching a retaliatory investigation into President Donald Trump was without evidence. There is no actual evidence for their probe into whether Donald Trump worked for the Russians. FBI officials instead cited their foreign policy differences with him, his lawful firing of James Comey, an alarm that he accurately revealed to the American public that he was told he wasn't under investigation by the FBI, which they lied about. So the sitting president of the United States says, am I under investigation, to James Comey? And he says, no, you're not. Well, he was. He totally was. So Democrats are using this article to, the news. They're using this as a bombshell. He's been under investigation. Our FBI has been investigating him for working for the Russians. When in reality, all of this is based on, guess what piece of garbage? The dossier. So remember, the dossier is a piece of opposition research created and paid for by the Clinton campaign. Hillary Clinton wanted Oppo research on her opponent. This is not abnormal. It's not illegal, but it's not to be used by intelligence agencies to launch investigations. Because if that's the case, I got a binder from an old campaign I worked on. Let's launch some investigations into any old person. If that's the standard, you just need an opposition research binder. How many staffers who've worked on a campaign of any kind, gubernatorial, all the way up the line, have an opposition research book that's been put together by a bunch of trackers and people they're looking for dirt. And they put the information into a binder, and then you read through it, and the comms people use it to create talking points. When they ask you about this, you make sure and point out that your opponent did that. When they bring up this item that you're in favor of for legislation, if you win, make sure and mention that he's not in favor of it because this is what he was doing in his personal time. He's got a problem with DUIs, drug abuse, extramarital affairs, yada, yada, yada. Don't use this, some of it red tabbed. Don't use this section unless, like, this is the break glass in case of fire. Only use this in case of, like, the campaign's going down the tubes, then you can use this. Meanwhile, the American people are like, oh, the president's being investigated because of Russian collusion? So I guess he is guilty. No, he's not. He's still just as innocent as the day is long. When we get back, we're going to talk about an illegal alien killing police officers. Stay right there.
Yo, what's up?
Hey, nothing much, man. Just trying to listen to this last song for the music final.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna fail for the most part. I haven't even listened to it.
Ugh, yeah, me neither. I've been too busy listening to The Word on the Street.
The Word on the Street?
Wait, you guys haven't heard?
No, I haven't heard of
Not
it.
me.
Not that one.
Well, check this out.
There is only one true word, and that is the Word of God, which is what you will hear on Word on the Street, hosted by me, Victory McIntosh. Tune in as we discuss some of the latest hot topics and life issues and filter them all through the holy Word of God. It is possible to live righteous before the Lord and enjoy doing it. Tune in Saturday mornings at 9 Central Time. You don't want to miss it.
Help her in her time of grief, Father.
Thank you, Father.
Give her strength, give her guidance, and help her realize that you are there with her.
Intercession is a unique form of prayer. It's praying on behalf of another individual.
Pastor Joseph Parker of the Hour of Intercession.
Our prayer life is to not consist only of praying for ourselves and our own families, but we're to pray much for the needs of others and the world.
Listen weekday afternoons at 1 Central here on Urban Family Talk.
I found myself in jail, too intoxicated to remember what happened that night. Another inmate had mentioned Teen Challenge. I gave my life to Christ, and this is the place that helped me lay a new foundation.
If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, Adult to Teen Challenge can help. There are centers across the country, and you can find the one nearest you at 855-END-ADDICTION or at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Securing America.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who's been traveling in the Middle East, addressed several areas of concern on CBS Face the Nation Sunday. He said the drawdown of U.S. troops from Syria is underway, but America isn't backing away from Iran's terror threat.
Those are all real missions. The tactical change we've made and the withdrawal of those 2,000 troops is just that, a tactical change. Mission remains the same.
He said that includes retrieving detainees in Iran, as Navy vet Michael White has been since last July.
We take the security of every American, wherever they are traveling in the world, as one of our foremost priorities. We will continue to work to get each of them back.
Pompeo said as part of his time in Saudi Arabia, he'll discuss their alliance, but the death of a journalist will not be ignored.
The murder of Jamal Khashoggi was outrageous, and we'll hold those responsible accountable.
But he said the benefits of the Saudi partnership will also be discussed in his meetings. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I hope on Monday what we'll see is finally Washington coming together and opening up the government. What that's going to take is for the Democrats to move off the position that they've been taking so far of no compromise, no movement. Their extreme position, they've got to be willing to give in on. The president has said over and over again, I've been in the room when he said it, that he's more than willing to compromise. He's more than willing to meet in the middle. The reason we have a shutdown is, let's go back to December. In December, the then Republican House passed funding for the entire federal government. It included $5.7 billion for an additional 234 miles of steel barrier. When it got to the Senate, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats filibustered that bill. Every Democrat said, no, we will not allow the government to be funded so long as they're building even a single mile of barrier. That's why we have a shutdown, and that's not a reasonable position. And the president's position has been he's perfectly happy to negotiate, to compromise. Yeah. He said many times, doesn't have to be $5.7 billion. He could find some other number, but the Democrats have said no. The only thing they're willing to consider is 0, 0, 0. That is not reasonable, and that's why we have a shutdown.
I mean, can it get any simpler than that? You recognize the voice there of Senator Ted Cruz in the great state of Texas, talking about why there's a shutdown at all. If they voted for $50 billion on different occasions in total, some parts, snippets, whatever, previously, then what would be the reason why they couldn't do the same thing right now? We have quantifiable evidence. I keep getting these cool videos and things sent to me in email, some of it by other people kind of working in the field, think tank folks, etc. And even some of them will say, well, I don't agree with the wall, but the walls do work. I mean, everywhere you look around the world where a wall has been put up, even if it's a 12-foot fence with concertina wire across the top and 3 rows of concertina wire on the side that's outside of the border, the illegals approach it, they see it, they realize it goes all the way around, and they don't come anymore because it's a waste of time. They're not going to go up against razor wire to get into the country. They're not going to cut themselves into ribbons. They know, well, we'll just go to a country that doesn't have a wall. It's pretty simple calculation. So we have the same thing going on. Wherever we have wall, the illegals avoid it like the plague. They go to the open areas. They're not going to the border points exclusively, the lawful entry points, because that would be if you're doing an asylum claim, and that processing means that you're going into the system, but they're still not getting background checks. They're not getting the, the medical screenings and the healthcare screenings, and that's dangerous to us here in this country on a whole other level. So this story that I'm going to talk about now is this police officer. His name is Ronald Singh, and he is a police officer who was killed by an illegal alien the day after Christmas. President Trump has called and spoken to the widow. They have a 5-year-old son. And the brother, Reggie Singh, actually went on Fox and Friends and just talked about his brother and losing him and how the little boy now has to grow up without a father. He was waiting for the son to walk and talk. He'll never be able to see that. And this is all going on in the context of this shutdown. And I don't understand how anybody could say that this isn't destructive to families. A little boy living, and we've talked about this. We've gone into the family ramifications of illegal immigration. It taxes the resources. People who should be paying one amount of tax, families are paying higher taxation, and their kids are in schools with kids who they not only don't speak English, they don't speak a form of Spanish that the dialect that we have here in this country. So the English as a second language industry is just exploding. And that is detrimental to classroom learning. Everyone not speaking English on day one means there's a group of kids who you have to slow the pace of the classroom down. And I know that this is the truth because for our kids, we could tell the difference in years where there were more talented and gifted kids in their classrooms. A couple of the years that our daughter was in elementary school, she was in class with a small pod. It was like, I don't know if the parents asked for them to be in the classroom together or if the administrators did it intentionally, but those kids being in the classroom meant that the teacher had to be snappy with it to keep their attention because they were on the smarter end of the spectrum. Everyone else in the classroom picked up on that, and the pace of learning increased. I promise you they got more than one classroom year of instruction done that year. And it happened another year where there were a group of those kids in the classroom. Our younger daughter tested into the little talented gifted thing, and she was in it's like they would group a few of them together and have them in the classroom. And it was just fascinating to see the kinds of things that the teachers who they've already learned how to deal with all of the different learning styles and all of that. And they would use these different methodologies of keeping those kids learning and engaged and entertained and in new content while also taking care of the other kids who were working at the normal pace. And this is in a AAA rated school district, one of the top school districts in the entire state of Missouri, where we knew our kids were going to get a good education. But it was still interesting to see how the teachers approached that. Now reverse the situation where the kids in the classroom, they could be as smart as a whip. We don't know. They don't speak English. So everything has to be spoken to them in their language. But you can't pull them out and have a Spanish-only classroom. Number one, because they don't all speak traditional Spanish as we would know it, as people are learning in Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 and Spanish 3 in high school. But because also that would be discrimination to pull all the kids who don't speak English out. They have to be mainstreamed into the classroom, which means everyone has to slow down so they can have their lessons read to them in a foreign language, and then they can ask their questions in a foreign language, and then they can, all that can be converted back into English. The inefficiencies there are astounding. And they really point to this idea where we're basically saying, whatever is the least efficient way of getting anything done, we're going to do it that way because that represents the way that has the least amount of quote finger discrimination. And I'm saying that sitting here just as black as I can get. Like, you know, I'm a black person. So I have concerns about discrimination, sure. But the discrimination that I'm most concerned with has to do with American families being subverted in favor of families that want to be in America but don't care if they're here legally. And the idea that we're ignoring the needs of our own population and instead preferring the needs of a population that should not be here. So it's just a terrible story here for the Singh family. The Stephen Siller Tunnels to Towers Foundation is now trying to raise enough money to pay off the family's $300,000 mortgage, and they're just $50,000 short of that. Well, and that's from this story here. They might have already reached their goal. And he says they came here to live the American dream. Let's show them the greatness of America and take care of this family. Reggie Singh, the brother of the fallen officer, has described the fundraising effort as a huge relief for him and his family. The illegal alien suspected of killing Singh, his name is Gustavo Perez Arriaga. He has had his case delayed until he gets a mental health evaluation. He's set to return to court early next month. And this all happened in the sanctuary state of California. If we were able to turn this suspected killer over to immigration, we wouldn't be having this interview right now because Officer Singh would still be alive. Talk about a devastating result to that young family. You know, he says you'll see vast numbers of vehicles driving through the desert and entering where you don't have any fencing or wall. A wonderful young police officer, I spoke to his wife yesterday, where he was viciously shot for simply stopping a person that came over the border illegally. He got shot and killed and took the most beautiful picture hours before. He'd been with his wife and child taking a Christmas picture, and then went out to work in his uniform and got shot by someone who's in the country unlawfully. You know, I don't know how anyone can defend that. I don't know how anyone can not recognize that it not only destroyed the Singh family, but it is destroying families across the country who they're not going to have their story told on Fox News because they are not in law enforcement, or their story just isn't going to make it to the mainstream news outlets. So there's that. We got to have the wall. We got to have it. And there's no way around it. There's just no good reason not to have the completion of the border wall and all of the other things that the president is asking for. So right now we're in the final moments of the show. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a preview for the remainder of the week. Tomorrow we're going to be speaking to John Gabriel, editor-in-chief of Ricochet. And then on Wednesday. On Wednesday, we're going to have Angie May, who's the director of the AFA store, coming into the show to talk to us about the AFA store and the products that you can buy there. Thursday, we're going to chat with Brandon Darby. He's a wonderful friend and he has such a passion for stopping human trafficking. He's going to be talking with us about immigration and border security. He's actually the director of Border and Cartel Chronicles Project for Breitbart News. And he's been cataloging all of this for a long time, since before it was ever a big story. And so it'll be a pleasure to speak with him and get an update there. And so there's all of that. We just so much going on there. And I think it's just kind of obvious that there's a desire to deflect away from the border story, that it's not a winning story for the Democrats, and that the shutdown isn't going the way they'd hoped, that they thought Donald Trump would have buckled by now. Like, where are you, person who buckles at the knees when you don't get the people don't buckle to you? It's not working because it's just so sad what's happening to Americans. And I think as more Americans become aware of what's happening, they're going to be on the side of law and order. You have to think to yourself, if you're on the side of illegal aliens coming here and, all the crime and everything that's going on, you have to kind of wonder to yourself, what am I going to get out of that? Like, advocating for lawlessness, what's that going to bring me? And so, the other headlines for today, I told you about the Democrats, 30 of them being in Puerto Rico with 109 lobbyists. They were down there for the weekend. Also, story kind of update on we had a couple segments on this. This PG&E chief executive is leaving, and the utility's actually preparing for a possible bankruptcy filing, which kind of seems a little unfair that they would get away from everything by doing that, but we'll see what happens. And then another story that I thought was pretty interesting, Megyn Kelly won in her fight with NBC. She left with $69 million, which is the total that they promised to pay her. This 3 months after she was cut as the host of the 9 a.m. hour of the Today Show, and she has a total of $69 million, which was the full amount of her contract with NBC. Apparently, the contract that she wrote was an ironclad, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. If I leave, I still get paid type contract. And so she's getting paid. She was only there for 18 months. And they weren't actually balking at paying her the astronomical salary amount that they'd agreed to. They wanted her to sign a non-disclosure agreement about the network and its staff. They don't want her out there talking and telling her story about how she was treated at NBC, which tells me she was treated pretty badly. I know a lot of people kind of had a negative taste in their mouth about Megyn Kelly because of her treatment of President Trump during the debates. But I just still remember her days on Fox News and how great things were, her hard-hitting questions for Democrats and how she was able to get people on there. And it was a really good show. And I know she's not going back there and those days are past and yada, yada, yada. But it just, to me, it's such a sad story of someone who she just had the best job and she let it go. And I don't know why I just feel so sorry for her. Not like, oh, poor Megyn Kelly, but just that even with all that money, her passion is doing television, journalism, heartbreaking news, political stories, talking to political types, arguing about the issues, getting facts out of people. And I don't know how she does that now with just, it's kind of like this scorched earth path that she's undertaken. But we've seen comebacks from far worse positions than this. And I just can't see her at her age going with her, millions into oblivion. I just can't see it. Although you have to think, after all the paparazzi, she's probably going to be really glad to have some time where people aren't paying attention to her, where she can just kind of meld in with her family and just not be the source of attention for a little bit and kind of reorient herself and get her bearings. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And they also have this story about this news place called Caroline's. It's a comedy club, and they sent out their annual hilarious holiday card with a topical wish list. And the card always begins, "May the holidays bring." And the highlights include a box of Band-Aids for Ariana Grande, reserved street parking for Alec Baldwin, and some blackface to cover up NBC's red face. Anyway, that's the show for today. Thank you for being here and for listening to the program. God bless you from the Heartland. We'll see you tomorrow.